Of course. Here is part 1, expanded to around 1,300 words, in simple, clear, and engaging English. I've avoided any violent or inappropriate content, keeping the tone dramatic and human. Let's begin. Lisa Carter stepped out of her car, feeling the early morning breeze touch her face. She wore a simple but neat suit, her badge and identification tucked safely into her purse. As she locked her car and crossed the parking lot, her mind replayed the details of the case. She was here for a sensitive matter involving national security. But nothing about her purpose at the courthouse would stand out to the casual observer. She looked just like any other person coming to attend a hearing as she reached the courthouse entrance. She smiled politely at the security guard, who nodded and let her in after a quick scan of her bag. The lobby was already busy with people, some dressed in suits, some in casual clothes, and others in uniforms. Lisa quietly found a seat in the waiting area, pulled out her folder, and began reading over her notes. She always prepared carefully, making sure she understood every detail. Today was no different. In another corner of the lobby, Officer Dan Mitchell stood watching the crowd. He was an older officer, with years of experience, and he prided himself on keeping the courthouse safe. He scanned the faces moving past, looking for anything out of place. As his gaze landed on Lisa, he paused. She didn't look nervous or suspicious, just focused, but for reasons he couldn't explain, he kept his eyes on her. Maybe it was her confidence, maybe her quiet presence, maybe it was simply that he didn't recognize her from his usual routine. Dan walked over slowly, trying not to draw attention, but his uniform and direct manner always made people notice. He stopped in front of Lisa, who looked up, surprised by the interruption. "Good morning," Dan said, his voice steady, but with an edge of authority. "May I ask what brings you to the courthouse today?" Lisa looked him in the eye and gave a small, polite smile. "I'm here for a hearing, sir," she replied, her voice calm and even. Don nodded, but he didn't move. "Can I see your ID?" "Please." Without hesitation, Lisa reached into her purse and handed him her government-issued ID and the letter summoning her to court. Don took them, examining the details carefully. Everything looked official, but he still felt uneasy. Checked her name, her photo, the stamp on the letter. He even turned the ID over, searching for any sign it might be fake. He couldn't find anything wrong, yet his doubt remained. Lisa sensed the tension but tried not to show it. She understood that sometimes security officers needed to be careful. She had worked with law enforcement before and respected their job. But as the seconds stretched on and Dan kept inspecting her ID, she began to feel uncomfortable. People in the lobby started to glance over, some curious, some worried. Lisa could feel their eyes, but she kept her head high. After a few minutes, Dan handed back her documents but didn't leave. Instead, he asked, "Are you sure you're at the right courthouse? You know, this is a secure area, right?" Lisa nodded again, keeping her voice polite. "Yes, sir. I've been assigned to testify here today. My hearing is scheduled for this morning. Arrived early to review my case notes." Dan looked at her for a long moment. He saw no sign of nervousness or guilt, but something inside him still whispered that something was wrong. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, or the fact that she was working alone. Whatever it was, he couldn't shake the feeling. He radioed a quick message to his partner, asking him to come over. Lisa stayed calm, trying not to let her frustration show. She knew she had done nothing wrong. She'd followed all the rules, brought her paperwork, and arrived on time. Still, being questioned in public felt uncomfortable. Dan's partner arrived, glancing between Dan and Lisa. Dan explained, quietly but clearly, that he wanted to double-check Lisa's credentials. Lisa handed her ID over again, this time with her work badge, which listed her title, Intelligence Officer. Dan's partner looked at the badge, surprised, but didn't say anything. He handed the documents back and stepped away, trusting Dan to handle it. Dan leaned in slightly. "I've never seen you here before," he said. "What agency do you work for?" Lisa answered, without hesitation, her voice still steady. "I work in intelligence. My position requires privacy, but all my documents are in order." Don raised his eyebrows. "Intelligence, huh? That's a first for this courthouse." He glanced at her paperwork again, then at her face. Searching for any sign she was making it up, Lisa could feel her patience running thin, but she stayed professional. "Is there anything else you need, sir?" "I have a lot to prepare before my hearing." For a moment, there was silence. Around them, the lobby continued its usual bustle, but the space felt small, tense. Lisa noticed a few people watching more closely now, perhaps sensing something out of the ordinary. A young man across the aisle pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages, but actually filming the interaction. Lisa saw the camera, but she ignored it. Dan finally stepped back, but his suspicions didn't go away. He decided to stay nearby, watching Lisa from a distance as she returned to her reading. Every few minutes he glanced her way, checking to see if she did anything he considered suspicious. Lisa tried to focus on her notes, but the uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach grew. She wondered if her day would get even more complicated. As time passed, more people entered the lobby. Some were lawyers, chatting quietly. Others were family members waiting for cases to be called. The security team walked in and out, nodding to familiar faces. Lisa sat quietly, reading her papers, but she couldn't escape the sense that all eyes were on her. Don paced the floor, checking doors and talking into his radio, but always keeping Lisa in his sight. Suddenly, Don's radio crackled. He stepped outside to answer a call, but Lisa could hear his voice, just out of earshot, speaking about someone unusual in the lobby. She heard her description repeated, along with words like unknown credentials and check her out. The pit in Lisa's stomach tightened. She had done everything right, but something told her the morning would not go as planned. As the clock ticked closer to her hearing time, Lisa gathered her belongings and stood up, ready to move toward the courtroom. But before she could take a step, Dan reappeared, blocking her path. He asked her again to confirm her name, her reason for being there, and her agency. Lisa answered each question clearly, holding out her paperwork again for review. By now, a small group of people had gathered nearby, pretending to look at the bulletin board but actually listening in. The quiet buzz of curiosity filled the room. Lisa tried not to let it bother her. She kept her voice low, but inside she felt a storm brewing, one she hoped would pass if only the officer would believe her. Don, however, was not convinced. He pulled out his own notepad, writing down Lisa's answers, her badge number, even the time she arrived. He said he would need to confirm everything with his supervisor. Lisa nodded, agreeing to wait, though she knew this delay might make her late for her own court appearance. As she sat back down, Lisa tried to steady her breathing. She reminded herself that she had done this before, waited patiently while someone double-checked her identity. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was the looks from the crowd, or the way Dan hovered nearby, as if waiting for her to make a mistake. Minutes felt like hours. The courtroom doors opened and closed. People went in and out, but Lisa remained in the lobby, under the careful watch of an officer who just couldn't let go of his suspicion. She knew her story was only beginning, and deep down, she hoped that truth and patience would win in the end. Let me know if you want part 2 written in the same style and detail. Certainly. It's part 2, expanded to about 1,300 words, in simple and engaging English. Without headings and without any inappropriate or violent content, Lisa tried to concentrate on her notes, but the tension in the air made it almost impossible. She could still feel Officer Dan's eyes watching her every move. He stood a few steps away, his arms crossed, talking quietly with his partner. Lisa checked the time and realized her hearing would begin soon. She was determined not to let this situation rattle her. She had faced pressure before, but this was different. Here in a public space, surrounded by people, she felt exposed and judged. Still, she reminded herself to stay calm and professional. The lobby felt louder now, even though no one was raising their voice. It was the way people were whispering, the way they glanced at Lisa and then quickly looked away when she noticed. 2 young women near the elevator exchanged looks, then focused on their phones, pretending to be uninterested. An older man in a gray suit paused as he passed by, curiosity written on his face. Lisa tried to ignore the stares, focusing on her breathing and her notes, as she knew that panicking would only make things worse. She took out her phone and quietly messaged her supervisor to let him know there was a delay at the courthouse. She hoped it wouldn't come to anything serious. After sending the message, she put her phone away, not wanting to give anyone another reason to question her presence. Suddenly, Officer Dan's partner, Officer Samuels, walked over. He was younger and seemed less sure of himself. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. "Could you please come with us for a moment? I just want to ask a few more questions." Lisa kept her voice steady and nodded, gathering her belongings. She followed them to a small side room near the lobby. It wasn't an official interview room, just a quiet space with 2 chairs and a table. Officer Dan closed the door behind them. Lisa sat down and folded her hands in her lap. Officer Samuels tried to smile, but Dan's face remained serious. "Ma'am, we just want to be sure of everything," Samuels began. "Could you tell us again why you're here?" Lisa explained her purpose, repeating the details she had already shared. She showed her paperwork again, pointing out the official stamps and signatures. She explained how her job sometimes required her to be present. At legal hearings for national security cases, Officer Samuels listened carefully, asking a few polite questions about her work, her agency, and the case she was there for. But Officer Dan wasn't satisfied. He picked up Lisa's government badge, studying it as if he might spot a hidden flaw. "How long have you worked in intelligence?" he asked. Lisa replied, "Almost 9 years, sir." Don nodded slowly. "And what made you choose this career?" Lisa answered honestly, sharing that she wanted to serve her country and use her skills to protect people. She spoke clearly and with pride, hoping they would finally believe her. Officer Samuel seemed more relaxed now, even giving a small smile. But Dan still looked doubtful. After several minutes of questions, Dan stood up. "Will just be a moment," he said, stepping outside with Samuels. Lisa sat alone in the quiet room, trying not to let her nerves show. She could hear faint voices through the door, Dan speaking in a low tone, Samuels answering quietly. She wondered what more they needed to know. While she waited, Lisa glanced out the window and saw people still moving through the lobby. She wondered if anyone had noticed her being led away. A wave of embarrassment washed over her. She wished she could simply attend her hearing like everyone else. The door opened again, and the 2 officers returned. "Ma'am, do you mind if we check your belongings?" Don asked. Lisa agreed, knowing she had nothing to hide. She handed over her bag, watching as they carefully looked through it, examining her folder, her pens, even her phone charger. Dan looked at her phone, which was locked, handed it back without a word. After the search, Lisa was allowed to return to the lobby, but she was now even more aware of every glance and whisper. As she walked back to her seat, she saw a few people watching her closely, some with concern, others with curiosity. She tried to act natural, but inside she felt frustrated and alone. Dan and Samuels returned to their post, but now both seemed more focused on her than before. Lisa knew she was being watched. She tried to ignore them, turning her attention back to her folder, but it was hard to concentrate. Minutes ticked by, and Lisa checked the time again. She was worried she might be late for her hearing. She glanced at the schedule posted on the wall, hoping to see her case number listed soon. Just then, a loud voice called out a different case, and a group of people filed through the doors suddenly. Dan approached her again, this time with a firmer tone. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to come with us to the security office," he said. Lisa looked up, surprised. "Is something wrong?" she asked, trying to stay calm. Don shook his head, but didn't offer an explanation. Lisa could see that arguing wouldn't help. She stood up and followed him and Samuels down a hallway. A few people in the lobby watched her go, whispering behind their hands. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording quietly, capturing the scene. When they reached the small security office, Don explained, "We're detaining you for further verification. Please hand over your phone and all your belongings." Lisa hesitated, but handed over her things. She asked if she could contact her supervisor, but Dan refused, saying, "We need to clear everything first." Lisa sat in the plane room, feeling the weight of the moment. She wondered how her supervisor would react if he didn't hear from her. She thought about her family, hoping they wouldn't worry. The situation felt surreal. She had come to do her job, just like any other day. But now, she was being treated as a suspect. Still, she tried not to show her frustration. She told herself to stay strong. Outside the security office, Dan and Samuel spoke quietly. Dan was certain he had done the right thing, convinced Lisa's story was suspicious. Samuel's was less sure, but he followed Dan's lead. They began to fill out paperwork, listing Lisa's name, her reason for being at the courthouse, and the items they had taken from her. Back in the lobby, word began to spread. A few people whispered about the woman being questioned. Someone posted a short video clip online. Within minutes, others started talking about it, wondering who Lisa was and why she was being detained in the security office. Lisa sat quietly, replaying the events in her mind. She thought about her training, about the importance of staying calm under pressure. She focused on her breathing, reminding herself that she had done nothing wrong. As time passed, Lisa noticed that no one had come to update her. She felt a knot in her stomach. She wondered if she would miss her hearing altogether. She worried that her reputation might be damaged by rumors or misunderstandings. Still, she refused to let fear control her. She decided that no matter what happened, she would handle the situation with dignity. Meanwhile, in the main hallway, Samuels returned to collect some information from the front desk. He noticed a few people watching him, curious about what was happening. He tried to act normal, but he felt uncomfortable under their gaze. Back in the security office, Lisa looked at the clock again. She realized she had been detained for longer than she expected. She wished she could call her supervisor, just to let him know she was safe. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Hoping that the situation would be resolved soon, Dan re-entered the room and told Lisa to wait just a little longer. She nodded, saying nothing. She looked out the window, watching the trees sway in the wind, and reminded herself that she had overcome greater challenges before. As the minutes dragged on, Lisa found comfort in her own strength. She knew she had nothing to hide. She would wait, and she would not let fear or frustration define her. Deep down, she hoped that soon someone would realize the mistake that had been made, and that the truth would finally come to light. Let me know when you're ready for part 3, and I'll keep the story engaging and dramatic. Absolutely. Here is part 3, expanded to around 1,300 words, written in simple, clear English. The narrative is engaging, dramatic, completely appropriate. Lisa sat quietly in the small security office, her hands folded in her lap. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the slow passing of time. She glanced at her reflection in the glass of a nearby cabinet. She looked calm on the outside, but inside a mixture of anxiety and determination filled her heart. She wondered how long this would last, how much longer she would be kept waiting for something she had not done. On the other side of the door, Officer Dan was busy talking with his supervisor on the phone. He repeated the story, explaining how he had found someone suspicious in the courthouse lobby, and how her documents did not feel right. The supervisor listened, then asked a few questions about Lisa's paperwork and her explanation for being there. Dan, still sure he was right, said he was certain that Lisa was not telling the whole truth. He wanted to make sure that the courthouse was safe. Meanwhile, Officer Samuel stood nearby, looking uneasy, glanced back at the security office, where Lisa waited. He had heard the way Lisa answered questions, her calm voice, her polite words. He wondered if maybe they had made a mistake, but he did not say anything. He was the junior officer, and it wasn't his place to challenge Dan in front of their supervisor. As the minutes dragged on, Lisa thought about her job. She thought about the many times she had faced difficult moments and kept her cool. Remembered her training and her promise to always do what was right, no matter how tough things became. She took a deep breath and looked around the room, searching for something positive to focus on. She noticed a small potted plant on the windowsill and smiled. Even here, in this difficult situation, life was growing quietly. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a loud ring. Lisa looked up. It was her phone, sitting on the table where the officers had placed her belongings. The phone's screen flashed with a number she knew all too well. It was an official line from her workplace, the Pentagon. The ring sounded urgent, as if to remind everyone in the room that something important was being missed. Officer Dan entered the room, startled by the noise. He saw the phone ringing and frowned. Picked it up, looking at the caller ID. He did not recognize the number, but he could see the name, Pentagon Communications. For a moment he hesitated, unsure what to do. Lisa spoke up, her voice steady. "Officer, that's my workplace calling. It's important that I answer. It could be about national security, or the reason I'm here today." Dan looked at her, then at the phone. He seemed unsure. He didn't want to hand her the phone, but he also didn't want to ignore a call from such an important place. He finally decided to answer it himself. He pressed the button and held the phone to his ear. "Hello, this is Officer Mitchell at the city courthouse," he said, trying to sound in control. A deep, serious voice replied, "This is Colonel Evans. From the Pentagon? I need to speak with Intelligence Officer Carter immediately. This is an urgent matter." Dan's eyes widened in surprise. He looked at Lisa, then back at the phone. She's here," but he began. The voice interrupted, "Put her on the line. Now." Don hesitated, but the urgency in the voice made him hand the phone to Lisa. She took it calmly, speaking in her usual professional manner. "This is Officer Carter." "Yes, sir. I'm at the courthouse now." She listened, nodded, and answered a few quick questions, confirming her location and status. As she spoke, Dan and Samuels watched her carefully. The tone of the conversation made it clear that Lisa really did work in a high-level job. Don began to feel a cold wave of doubt. Had he made a mistake? He tried to listen to the conversation, but Lisa's words were careful. She shared only what was necessary. After a minute, Lisa handed the phone back to Dan. The voice on the other end spoke again, firm and clear. "Officer Mitchell, I expect Intelligence Officer Carter to be treated with full respect. She is here on official business. If you need confirmation, you may contact our security office. Do not delay her further. This is a matter of national importance." Dan's hands shook slightly as he ended the call. He looked at Samuels, who seemed just as stunned. The phone's screen went dark, but the message was clear. Lisa was not just another visitor. She was someone whose work mattered at the highest level. Samuels spoke first, his voice quiet. "Maybe we should check her credentials again, with the numbers she gave us, and call the security office at the Pentagon."
Oh.
Don nodded suddenly, unsure of himself. He felt the eyes of everyone in the hallway on him, though the door was closed. He stepped out of the room to make the call, leaving Samuels and Lisa alone. Lisa sat back in her chair, her hands folded again. She felt a sense of relief, but also disappointment. She knew her position did not make her better than anyone else, but she also knew that she deserved to be treated fairly. She hoped this call would be enough to clear the air and let her continue with her job. As Don waited for the security officer at the Pentagon to answer his call, he replayed the events in his head. He remembered the look on Lisa's face, the way she had remained calm, even when he was tough on her. He felt a sting of embarrassment. He'd been so sure, and now it seemed he might have been wrong. After a short wait, someone from Pentagon security picked up. Don explained the situation, reading out Lisa's credentials, her badge number, and her reason for being at the courthouse. The officer on the other end checked the information, then spoke firmly. "We're speaking about Intelligence Officer Carter. She is authorized to be at your location. Please let her go about her business. If there are any further delays, contact our office immediately." Dan hung up the phone, feeling even more embarrassed than before. He walked back into the security office where Lisa and Samuels waited. He tried to keep his voice steady as he spoke. "Ma'am, it appears everything is in order. You're cleared to go. I apologize for the delay." Lisa nodded, gathering her belongings. She thanked Officer Samuels, who gave her a small, apologetic smile. Dan handed her back her phone and folder, avoiding her eyes. As Lisa stood, she heard the buzz of whispers in the hallway. News travels fast in places like this, and people were already talking about the woman whose phone had rung from the Pentagon. Lisa ignored the stares as she made her way back to the courtroom in the lobby. A few people watched her, their eyes wide with curiosity. Some seemed impressed, others confused. The young man who had filmed earlier now stood with a group of friends, whispering about what had just happened. Lisa ignored it all, focused on getting to her hearing in time. Dan and Samuels returned to their post, but now the mood was different. Samuels seemed thoughtful, perhaps rethinking the way he would handle similar situations in the future. Dan, on the other hand, felt unsettled. He knew he would have to explain his actions to his supervisor. He also wondered if there might be consequences for holding up someone so important, just because of a feeling he couldn't explain. As Lisa entered the courtroom, the judge looked up and nodded. Lisa took her seat, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. She was grateful to finally be where she needed to be, ready to do her job. She hoped the rest of her day would be smoother, and that maybe in some small way, what had happened might lead to a better understanding between people from different walks of life. Lisa straightened her papers, took a deep breath, and prepared to speak. The ordeal was not yet over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Let me know if you'd like part 4 next, and I'll keep the story just as interesting and dramatic. Of course, here's part 4, expanded to about 1,300 words, in simple, clear, and engaging English. The story continues smoothly, remains dramatic and thoughtful, and avoids any inappropriate or violent content. Lisa sat quietly in the courtroom, still feeling the echoes of everything that had happened in the last hour. The room was filled with people waiting for their hearings to start. Some whispered about cases, others just sat and watched, their faces showing boredom or worry. For Lisa, this courtroom was not new. She had sat in similar rooms many times for her work. But today, she felt more exposed than ever. She tried to focus on the folder in her hands, reviewing her notes one more time. Across the room, the judge finished speaking to a lawyer and called for a short break. Lisa glanced up as the judge caught her eye and gave a polite nod. The judge had seen her name on the schedule and knew she was there for an important matter. Even so, the judge seemed unaware of what had happened outside the courtroom just minutes ago. Back in the lobby, the events surrounding Lisa's detainment were still the main topic of conversation. Some people wondered aloud about the woman who had received a phone call from the Pentagon. Others speculated about her work. The young man who had recorded the incident now checked his video again, deciding whether to share it online. The buzz of conversation grew. A few court staff members peeked into the courtroom to see if Lisa was there. Meanwhile, Officer Dan stood near the door with Officer Samuels. Dan looked down at the ground, replaying the Pentagon call over in his head. He felt the weight of what had just happened and knew he would have to explain himself to his superiors soon. Samuels quietly watched Lisa through the glass. Thinking about the whole morning and realizing how quickly assumptions could lead to trouble, the courthouse supervisor arrived soon after. Walking briskly through the lobby, she had been called by the judge and had already heard bits and pieces of what happened. She went straight to Dan, asking for a full explanation. Don told his side of the story, describing how he thought Lisa's presence was suspicious, how her answers made him uncertain, and how the Pentagon phone call had changed everything. The supervisor listened carefully. She asked for Lisa's documents, then requested to see her directly. Don hesitated but finally nodded, leading the supervisor toward the courtroom. They knocked quietly on the door and stepped inside. The judge, seeing the supervisor, called for another break and nodded for Lisa to join them in a side room. Lisa followed the supervisor and Dan down the hallway, her folder pressed to her chest. She tried to stay calm, but she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The supervisor spoke gently but seriously. "Miss Carter, I'd like to apologize for what you've been through today. We need to verify everything one more time for our records. Would you please show me your credentials?" Lisa nodded, handing over her ID, her badge, and the official court letter. The supervisor checked each item, reading carefully and comparing details with her list. She made a quick call to the number Lisa provided for her department. Within minutes, the person on the line confirmed Lisa's role and the reason for her presence at court. The supervisor thanked the person on the phone, then turned to Lisa with an apologetic smile. "Thank you, Miss Carter. Everything is perfectly in order. We're grateful for your patience. I'm very sorry for any distress we've caused." Lisa nodded, accepting the apology. She appreciated the supervisor's polite manner and clear process. She only wished it had not taken so long to reach this point. She wondered if things would have been different, if she looked different, or had a different job. Still, she kept these thoughts to herself, focusing on the present moment. Dan stood quietly nearby, looking at his shoes. He mumbled an apology, but his voice was soft. He seemed uncomfortable and embarrassed, but Lisa only nodded in return, deciding it was better to let the moment pass without argument. As Lisa returned to the courtroom, she noticed the mood had shifted, watched her with a new kind of respect or curiosity. She could feel their eyes following her, and she overheard snippets of conversation. "That's her, the intelligence officer. Did you hear her phone rang from the Pentagon? I hope she's okay." Some people seemed supportive, while others just wanted to know more. Lisa tried to ignore the whispers and focused on her hearing. She took her seat, placed her folder on the table, and waited for her turn to speak. The judge returned to the bench, called the room to order, and began the next case. Outside, the courthouse buzzed with news. Some court staff shared the story with colleagues. Others checked their phones for updates. A few had even seen the short video clip online, showing Lisa being led away and her phone ringing with Pentagon on the screen. The story spread quickly, and soon it was all anyone could talk about. Inside the courtroom, Lisa listened as her case was called. She stood, approached the front, and addressed the judge with confidence. She explained her findings, shared her expert knowledge, and answered questions with clarity. The judge listened carefully, asking a few thoughtful questions before thanking Lisa for her testimony. Her calm manner and professional approach left a strong impression on everyone in the room. When her testimony was finished, Lisa gathered her papers and returned to her seat. The judge paused and then said, "Ms. Carter, thank you for your service. We appreciate your expertise and your dedication." Lisa nodded, grateful for the recognition. After the hearing, the judge approached Lisa privately and apologized on behalf of the court for any trouble she had faced. "You handled yourself with real dignity today," the judge said. Lisa thanked the judge and assured her that she understood the need for careful security. As Lisa prepared to leave, a few people approached her quietly. A young woman who had watched the events unfold said softly, "You were really strong today. I hope they treat you better next time." Lisa smiled, thanking her for the kind words. As Lisa stepped out of the courtroom and into the lobby, she saw Officer Samuels. Standing nearby, he hesitated, then walked over. "Ms. Carter," he said quietly, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything earlier. I think I learned something today. I hope you have a better day from here on out." Lisa appreciated his honesty. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Officer Samuels. I hope so too." We all learn from experience. Dan, however, kept his distance. Still shaken by the morning's events, he knew he would have to write a report about what happened, and he wondered how it would look. He remembered the moment when Lisa's phone rang, and he realized how quickly his certainty had disappeared. As Lisa walked through the lobby, she noticed a few people smiling or nodding at her. She returned their smiles, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. She had never wanted special attention. She just wanted to do her job with respect. Still, she was glad that in the end, the truth had come out. Outside, the sun was shining. Lisa paused on the courthouse steps, breathing in the fresh air. She looked back at the building, thinking about all the people inside, some who had believed in her, others who had doubted her. She hoped that, after today, a few more people would look at others with open minds. Lisa pulled out her phone and called her supervisor, letting him know everything was resolved. He was relieved and praised her for her patience. "You represented us well, Lisa," he said. "We're proud of you." As she walked away from the courthouse, Lisa felt lighter. She knew there would always be challenges in her work, but today, she had proven to herself and others that patience and dignity could make a difference. She decided she would share her story, not to shame anyone, but to help others understand the importance of respect, fairness, and not jumping to conclusions. For Lisa, the day had started with difficulty, but it ended with hope. She had faced a test of character and passed it with strength and grace. And as she headed back to her office, she hoped her experience would inspire positive changes for everyone who walked through those courthouse doors in the future. Let me know if you'd like part 5 next. Absolutely. Here is part 5, expanded to about 1,300 words. Written in simple, clear English with a focus on dignity, hope, and positive change. The story remains engaging, human, and appropriate from start to finish. Lisa stepped out of the courthouse, the bright sunlight shining on her face as if welcoming her back to the ordinary world. The events of the morning still echoed in her mind, but now there was a sense of calm in her heart. She walked down the courthouse steps slowly, breathing deeply, feeling the mix of relief and tiredness that always followed a long, stressful day. She paused for a moment at the bottom of the steps and looked up at the old building. In some ways, it felt just like any other courthouse. But for Lisa, it would always be the place where her patience and character had been tested in ways she could never have expected. She took out her phone and dialed her supervisor's number, wanting to let him know she was safe and that everything was finished. When he answered, Lisa told him how the situation had unfolded, how the misunderstanding at the entrance had turned into a long morning of waiting and questions, and finally, how the call from the Pentagon had cleared everything up. Her supervisor listened carefully, then praised her for her calmness and professionalism. "You handled it the right way, Lisa. I'm proud of you. We'll make sure this doesn't happen again." As she ended the call, Lisa saw her reflection in the courthouse window. She looked tired but strong. She smiled a little, thinking about how much one person's attitude and decisions could change the outcome of a day, not only for herself, but for everyone involved. Before she could leave, a small group of people gathered by the steps. Some were courthouse staff, others were people who had witnessed parts of the incident inside. A young woman from the security team approached Lisa. "First, I just wanted to say, I saw how you handled everything. You were so calm. I hope people learned something from what happened." Lisa nodded and thanked her, feeling comforted by the kindness. Another person, an older man who had sat in the lobby, came over and shook her hand. "It's not right what happened to you, but you didn't lose your temper, and that takes real strength. Thank you for showing us a better way." Their words meant a lot to Lisa. She didn't feel angry anymore. She just hoped the story would remind others not to judge so quickly and to always give people a chance to explain themselves. As Lisa walked to her car, she opened her email and saw a message from the Pentagon's Office of Security. It was short and formal, but clear. "Thank you for your professionalism. We have spoken to courthouse officials. The matter is closed and you are cleared for your next assignment." Lisa was glad to see her work was not affected. She knew that every day brought new challenges, but she felt ready to face them. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, Officer Dan Mitchell sat at his desk filling out a report about the morning. He wrote about how he had followed his instincts and asked for ID, how he had doubted Lisa's explanation, and finally, how the call from the Pentagon changed everything. As he wrote, he felt a mix of embarrassment and regret. He knew he had made a mistake by letting his suspicions take over. He wondered what he could have done differently. Dan's supervisor stopped by and read over the report. He asked Dan if there was anything he would do differently if faced with a similar situation again. Dan thought for a moment, then replied, "I try to listen better next time. I'd ask for help sooner instead of trying to handle it all myself, and maybe I'd remember that everyone has a story." His supervisor nodded. "It's good. Dawn, we're going to do some extra training on recognizing bias and communicating with people from all backgrounds. What happened today was tough, but maybe it will help us all learn." The video from the lobby had already been shared online. It showed Lisa being led away calm and dignified, and the moment her phone rang with the word Pentagon on the screen. In the hours that followed, people across the city started to talk about the incident. Some expressed anger that Lisa had been treated unfairly, while others praised her strength and professionalism. A few even wrote letters to the courthouse, asking for changes in how security was handled. Lisa's story soon reached local news. Reporters wanted to know more about her, but she politely declined interviews, saying she didn't want to be the center of attention. She agreed to share her experience in a different way by speaking to a group of law enforcement officers during their next training session. She hoped that by telling her story in her own words, she could help prevent similar misunderstandings. For others in the future, on the day of the training, Lisa stood in front of a room filled with police officers, court staff, and security guards. She spoke clearly and honestly about what had happened. She explained how important it was to listen, to check facts, and to treat everyone with respect. She described how it felt to be doubted and questioned. Even though she had done nothing wrong, many of the officers listened closely. Some took notes, others simply watched Lisa, realizing how much courage it took to speak about such a personal experience. Officer Samuels was there too. Afterward, he thanked Lisa for her words. "I won't forget what you said today," he told her. "We all need reminders to do better." Lisa's story had another effect too. The courthouse started a new policy that made it easier for people with special assignments, like intelligence officers, to check in privately before their hearings. The court also offered more training on recognizing unconscious bias and understanding different backgrounds. These changes made the courthouse a safer and more welcoming place for everyone. For Lisa, life soon returned to its normal rhythm. She went back to her work, focusing on her assignments with the same dedication as before. She stayed in touch with a few people she had met at the courthouse, like the young security woman and Officer Samuels. Sometimes they exchanged emails. Sharing stories of positive changes at work, Lisa also noticed something different in herself. She felt stronger, more sure of her own ability to handle difficult moments. She realized that one day's challenge could become another person's lesson. She was proud that she had stood her ground and stayed calm, even when things felt unfair. Sometimes, Lisa thought back to that morning at the courthouse. She remembered the looks of doubt, the quiet support from strangers, and the sound of her phone ringing at just the right time. She understood now more than ever that everyone faces moments where their patience and character are tested. It's what you do in those moments that matters most. Lisa never saw Officer Dan again, but she heard that he had changed too. He became more open-minded, more willing to ask questions, and less quick to judge. Samuels grew more confident in speaking up when he saw something wrong, inspired by Lisa's calm example years later. Lisa would sometimes visit the courthouse on new assignments. The staff always greeted her kindly, and the security process was smoother and more respectful. She knew her experience had helped make things better for others, and that was enough for her. Lisa's story became one that people in the city remembered, a story about misunderstanding, but also about growth and hope. Her dignity in the face of challenge showed everyone that respect, listening, and fairness can change not only a single day but the lives of many. And every time Lisa looked back at that day, she smiled, knowing that patience and courage could shine even in the most unexpected places. Let me know if you'd like another story, outline, or anything else. I'm here to help.